to the primacy of Peter and visiting the Mansa Christi. And then we're going to the house of the mother-in-law of Peter, where Jesus, we call the city of Jesus, because that is where he spent most of his time, near the Sea of Galilee. So that is our plan for today. And afterwards, the mountain of transfiguration. But look around you at the mountains. This is the, without the houses, this is the views that they saw.
We'll talk about it when we go there. Where does he go after he's driven out of Nazareth? He comes over here. He comes over to the Sea of Galilee, and next to the sea he meets fishermen. And he tells them, you're fishermen now, you're fishing for fish, but if you follow me, I will teach you how to fish for men, for people. I will teach you how to talk in a way that would convince people to follow you. And so they start. The first 3 disciples are right from here, from Capharnaum. And there's another church, the one with the pink sort of dome over there. That is the church of the disciples, where he met his 3 first disciples. One of them was Peter, Petrus. At that point, his name was Shimon. His name will change to Peter later on, and we'll talk about it in one of our other stations where it happened. But Peter, his mother-in-law, lives over here. And these are the first days of Jesus Christ around the Sea of Galilee. And he tells him that his mother-in-law is very, very sick. She's basically dying. And he comes over here and he heals her. This is the first time that he heals someone. After he heals her, she says, this house is open for you. And from that point on, for the time of the ministry around the Galilee, he lives in this house, probably with the first disciples. How do we know that the house is here? So the more ancient the tradition is that this is the place, the closer to the days of Jesus Christ, we know that it's probably the right place. So this is a very modern church above us, but the modern church has a glass floor, and through the glass floor, what you can see is this octagonal sort of structure. Everybody sees it? It has 8 corners, right? So this is a church from Byzantine time, from 1,500 years ago, 1,500 years ago. What does it mean when there's an octagonal church? Usually it means that right in the center of that church is something important that people want to remember. What's in the center of this Byzantine church? A house from 100 years after the days of Jesus Christ. That house is what we call a domos ecclesia. Domos is a house in Greek. Ecclesia is what we will later on call churches. Ecclesia is a place of gathering together. In the first days after Jesus Christ, the first people that followed him, the first Christians, were chased down by the Romans. Christianity was not allowed by the Roman Empire. So most of them had to die as martyrs because they continued believing in their faith. So how do you have a church? How do you have a place where all Christians know to go to, but you make it secret so that the Romans won't know? So what they did is they had secret symbols. One of that secret symbols was a fish. Because the first disciples came from here, from the Sea of Galilee. You understand that when you see this. When you go to the Pope and he has a fish on his symbol, it's because he comes from this place. So the first churches had a fish on the entrance so that people would recognize them as a church. And what we see here is a house 100 years after Jesus Christ with a fish in the entrance. So one of the most ancient and first churches in the world. How do we know that underneath this is the house? Right under that church is a house from the days of Jesus Christ. And what we're doing now is we're going to the synagogue right over there. And when we walk, you will see on your right archaeological remains. They are the village of Capharnaum from the days of Jesus Christ. But what happened in this house? So we said Jesus healed the mother-in-law of Peter. Also healed a few other people. He drove away demons. He preached, he taught. Everything he did around the Galilee, he came out from this house. At some point, when he lived here, he had so many disciples, so many followers, that they were standing in front of him. It was a very small house. And we know from Luke that they wanted to bring a crippled man for him to heal. But they couldn't move him in because there were so many people. So they took out the roof so they can lower him in. This is how many people followed him at this point. It all happens here. We're going to walk to the synagogue, and we'll talk a little bit about that over there. So what's unique about Capharnaum is this is one of the only places in the world where we can see how Judaism and Christianity got along in the first days after Jesus Christ. So Jesus was Jewish. He was preaching to the Jews. The one that established Christianity from his words afterward was Peter. But in the days of Jesus and just afterwards, the first Christians and the Jewish people lived together. So this is one of the only places where you see that, where you saw how big the church was, right? And you see how big the synagogue is. So you understand that at this point, Judaism is still stronger than Christianity. This synagogue is from about 200 years after Jesus Christ, but underneath is another synagogue from the days of Jesus. So if he was Jewish, he probably came to this synagogue. These are the things that will get you into the kingdom of heaven. And so he stands here on this mountain, seeing this view, and says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed and merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." So there are 8 sentences, 8 paragraphs to those who will inherit the kingdom of heaven. And in the similar way, when you go inside, the church is built in 8 corners. Each corner is dedicated to one of those sentences, and you'll see them inside. Right. This church was built in the beginning of the 20th century during the days of the Second World War. And the architect, Berluzzi, was an Italian who worked for Mussolini. So when you go inside, don't be surprised that there's a dedication to Mussolini inside the church in Israel. When you go outside, you will see in front of you, before the doors, 2 cloaks. Those cloaks belonged to 2 of the popes that visited Israel and came to this church and were so moved by reading the sermon right here in front of the view where it happened that they left their cloaks here. So you can see them outside. So when you go inside, you can see the 8 paragraphs of the sermon, the 14 stations of the cross, because it's a Catholic church, and the 2 cloaks of the popes. When you go outside of the church, and I really recommend doing this, walk in front of the terrace over here, and you will see the Sea of Galilee in its entirety in front of you. You can basically stand and hug the entire area where Jesus' ministry was. So this is what you can do here. There's free toilets downstairs. Be on the bus in 15 minutes is enough? 15 minutes. 15 minutes. It's 10 minutes to 10 now. All right, enjoy. Inside right over here. This is the viewpoint. Inside the dining.